Hello everyone, long time no talk. I'm so sorry, it's been a while since my last video. I've had a lot going on in my home life and music life, so I've just been kind of like waiting for the perfect moment to film a video, and it hasn't happened in the past couple weeks. And today is not the perfect day either. You can see I'm not seated in my normal spot. I just had my carpets cleaned today and they're still wet, and I really just didn't want to sit on a wet carpet and film a video, but I know it's been so long since I've made a video, so I was just like, you know what, we're just gonna make it work. Sitting on my bed today, I'm holding my camera instead of having it in a tripod, and that's gonna just have to do it. I have a very long overdue video, which is just the overall review of the Miami Music Festival. I've been home for over a month now, so it's been a hot minute, but I took copious notes about what I wanted to talk about in this video, so fear not, I haven't, forgotten my experience by now, but this is definitely a video I wanted to make, even though it took me forever to get here. So again, thank you for your patience. So I really just wanted to talk about every little aspect of the program, breaking things down into what I did on a normal day, and I did, I talked about what a regular day was at the Miami Music Festival in one of my other videos. So if you haven't watched that, please do so, but this is going to go more in depth about how I really felt about each part of the program and how regular days sort of went in the program. So first things first, going to eat during the day, the cafeteria. I would say overall the food was good. We had a fair amount of options at the cafeteria. It was buffet style, so if you didn't like what the chefs were making, you always had the option of salads and sandwiches and wraps and that sort of stuff, which was nice. I do think the price we paid for a meal plan was expensive for just a month, and it was also frustrating that you really didn't have any other option besides the cafeteria unless you had a car or lived off campus, because there were a couple other little spots on campus to eat, like a Subway and a Starbucks, but those weren't open on the weekends, so you really had to use the cafeteria. And I think I mentioned in another video, just the location of Barry University, you're not able to really walk anywhere to get food, either grocery store or restaurant wise, so you would have to pay to take an Uber or a Lyft to go anywhere. And also in the dorms we were staying in, they didn't have any kitchens, they didn't have any refrigerators or microwaves for us to use, so that was just kind of frustrating. Just the fact that our options were limited, and sometimes the hours that the cafeteria was open was not helpful or available when we were in rehearsal, and obviously you can't skip rehearsal to eat. So there were times we had to choose between eating and going to rehearsal, or going to a master class or a concert, and I just don't think you should have to choose that. You're paying for the program and you should be able to do all of that and still get 3 square meals a day, especially if you're paying for a meal plan, but that's just my 2 cents with that. So the next thing that I wanted to talk about with the program was the rehearsals. The rehearsals were probably the best part of the program. The director and conductor that I got to work with were the most incredible people I have ever worked with. They were so calm, cool, and collected during rehearsals. They said at the very beginning, when we were all kind of like first meeting each other, like, this is our quiet space, this is our, not quiet space, this is our Zen space, like, leave all of your junk outside of rehearsal, and we like to keep it as smooth and efficient as possible, and they really did that. Like, that was one of the smoothest rehearsal processes I have ever been a part of in any festival, in any school production, professional production. It was incredible. So that was probably the highlight of the program for me, was working with them. I didn't feel like my time was hardly ever wasted. There were, I mean, just because of the characters, or the character that I was, you know, being a nymph, there were times, especially like in the prologue, we didn't have any music, but they decided to add us for blocking, so we would have to sit through runs of the prologue, which was kind of long, but you know, if you're in the prologue, you have to be there, you have to know how the whole thing runs. So those times it was a little bit long for us to be there, but there really weren't too many of those days where I felt like I don't need to be here, but I'm called here, you know, that sort of thing. So I thought they were wonderful to work with. All right, next, master classes. I think I mentioned in one of my other videos that we were all promised to be in at least one master class. The apprentice artist, which was what I was part of, those singers were promised 2 master classes, which I had, but I also mentioned there were at least like 50 singers just in the first session that I was a part of, and if you do the math, promising each one of those at least one, and many of them 2 master classes, you can probably guess there were a lot of master classes. Almost every day, sometimes multiple times a day, there were master classes. And while I appreciate that they made great efforts to keep their promise of giving everybody the opportunity to be in 1 to 2 master classes, it did feel very like squished for time, and like we have to squeeze everybody in. They usually would overbook the master classes. They would schedule too many singers for time that was allowed, you know, only allowing like 15 minutes per singer, which is, you can't get too much done in that amount of time, and a lot of the people leading the master classes didn't stick to a clock. You know, they would say in the beginning, okay, we have this many singers, we have this much time, each singer gets this amount of time, and they would go over, especially at the beginning of the master class, and then the people who ended up being last were kind of shafted, like they didn't get their full amount of time, or they didn't get to go at all. Occasionally a couple people leading the master class would, you know, say, hey, I will make up this time to you after, at another time, which is great, but it was still very frustrating to be sitting through those and seeing singers anxiously wait, am I gonna get some time, am I gonna get any time, because I've been in that spot and it's not fun to be in. So yeah, that was kind of frustrating, but I tried to go to as many as I could. Some of them were wonderful. I have to say the ones I was in weren't particularly groundbreaking in my opinion, at least what they were saying to the singers, or teaching to the singers, but you can't really choose what master classes you're going to be in, so that's just the way it is. But I wish they had, maybe they need to cut back on master classes and just say everybody gets 1, and then allow adequate, like really adequate time for the amount of singers in each master class. It needed to be cut down by 3 to 5 people per master class at least, to give sufficient time, in my opinion, because time management was a big issue with the master classes. All right, next topic, lessons. Similar to master classes, they promised you would all have a lesson once a week, about every 4 days or so. And they would rotate you with the teachers that you worked with. But because of the timing of when certain teachers were at the program, sometimes you would have 2 lessons with the same teacher. I ended up having that, and I also had a master class with that same teacher, which Would have been great if I'd felt like I was making a lot of progress with that teacher, but I did not, unfortunately. So that was kind of frustrating, the fact that they didn't, I understand it's a lot of people to manage, but just like looking for some of that overlap. Oh, this person has 2 lessons and a masterclass with the same person. Maybe we should rotate them a little bit. And that happened a fair amount, which was kind of annoying in my opinion. And then also the lessons were only 45 minutes long. And I'm sorry, I think you need at least a solid hour to really do something with a singer in terms of teaching, especially when it's somebody you're just starting to work with. You don't know their problems, you don't know all of their rep, you're just meeting them, and you only have 45 minutes to try to accomplish something. I think that's really, really challenging to do. I felt like I had a couple of lessons that felt really productive though, but again, it's still like, I was getting a lot of different opinions because I was working with 4 different teachers back to back, so I don't know how productive that is necessarily. I almost wish we had been assigned 1 teacher for the full month, but but like I said, they didn't, not all of the teachers were there for the full month, so it was tricky kind of trying to plan everybody out and schedule wise and all that. But anyway, that's how I felt about lessons. Next thing, tech week. Tech week can be the most stressful part of a production, but similar to the rehearsals, I felt like the tech week went really smoothly. There weren't any major disasters. We took time that was needed. We were not held ever past the time we should have been. I know in past school productions that has certainly happened, and that was a frustrating thing, but I was glad, you know, when we got to rehearsals and tech week, they kept to the time schedule, even if some things weren't worked as much as they had hoped to. But again, I think that just goes to show how well our director, conductor, and all of the technical people had worked so well together in advance to plan out that week and how everything was going to run. So the performance, just like the rehearsals and tech week, I thought it went smoothly. I felt really comfortable by the time I was on stage and in front of an audience. I really wasn't nervous, and it just felt ready, and like we were ready to present the work that we had done. So I feel really good about the performance overall. There were of course a couple of little musical moments that weren't my best, but we all have those, and I'm just pleased with how it felt on stage, and I'm excited to see what it looks like when we get our recordings, which by the way should be soon. We just received an email with some of the pictures from the productions, and we should be receiving the recordings of our productions in September. So fingers crossed that all comes when they say it's going to, and I'm hoping I can upload some of that for you guys once I get my hands on it. Okay, so another thing I want to talk about is the costume department. How do I put this nicely? The costume department for the Miami Music Festival, at least when I was there the first session, and with my production, I can't speak for the other ones, was one of the most frustrating experiences I have ever been a part of in all of my acting and singing experience ever. They had a couple of interns who were not paid, and the work showed for that. We had been emailed before the production to send measurements for our costumes, and I did that. And then when we got there, they took measurements again. And then when we got to trying on costumes, the majority of costumes for our production were extremely large on us. And I'm like, why did we bother sending you measurements? Why did you bother taking measurements? Because these costumes don't fit. You'll probably see if I may not even upload parts of the prologue because I don't sing in it, but we were wearing these robes, and they were honestly like these old man cigar smoking robes that were ginormous on the nymphs. Like, they didn't fit us, they didn't coordinate at all, they didn't really fit with the time period. I don't really understand what they were trying to get at with those. It just felt like very like thrown together. Oh, we'll just put them in these old robes we have in our department. And I get it's a low budget production, but you could still find some cheap robes, I feel like, to put us in. Furthermore, our costumes for the main opera, the nymphs, those costumes were ordered very last minute. We didn't have them for my cast's tech rehearsal, and granted it's a tech rehearsal, it didn't technically need to be costumed, but they had everybody else who had costumes in costume, which was everybody else. Everybody else had their costume except the nymphs, which was really disappointing because they just decided to put us in leotards, and so like it just felt like it was very last minute that they had decided to put us in that because nothing had been ordered in advance clearly, which I don't understand when we had sent measurements and you took measurements like the first day we were there, and then we got 3 weeks later and we still didn't have anything. It was really like confusing and frustrating in my perspective. And I did want to talk about that because I don't know how their costume department has been in previous years. I'm hoping it improves in the future, but I have to say overall, I was very disappointed about how they handled our production. And you'll see in a lot of the other characters, things were oversized as well with costumes, and I don't really get it. But yeah, I need to be honest with you guys about how my experience was, and that was probably the worst part of the program, was dealing with costumes. And it shouldn't really matter in terms of a program. The costume should not be that high on the list, but like when you're that frustrated and feel like such a second thought or an afterthought in a production, it upsets you for sure. One of the last things I wanted to talk about was the administration overall of the program. I did feel like there were some things that still needed to be worked out administration-wise, just in terms of sharing information with singers, things that were sent before you got to the program, how the schedule was handled while we were there, that sort of stuff. I remember one of the things we were sent before attending the program was a list of things to bring. And a lot of that was just like generic stage makeup, character shoes, have some dressy black items, a gown, a rehearsal skirt for ladies, and that's all I remember off the top of my head. I wish they had been more, what am I trying to say? I wish they had done a little bit more homework in terms of deciding what to tell people to bring, because most of us were coming from out of state. We had to pack suitcases, decide what was important, because space and weight is limited when you're traveling on a plane. And I can tell you, I never used a rehearsal skirt, but I specifically bought that for this production because I was asked to bring one, and I assumed, if I need to have one, then I have to have one. I don't want to be that person without one. I never once used it. So that took up space in my bag that I didn't need, and I spent money on something I didn't need. The black items I didn't really need either. I did use them just because I, like occasionally needed something looked a little nicer, or I wanted to dress up for a master class, but I did not specifically ever need black items. I think those were mainly intended for people in the studio program who were part of the scenes performance, because those weren't really costumed. I think that's more what that was intended for. So those were some items that I didn't necessarily have to bring. And then when they were sending us, you know, information about, you know, Barry University and what that campus offered, where nearby resources were, they made it sound like there were stores very close by, and I kind of assumed that to mean I could walk that distance, like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes or so would be great. But once I got there and I needed some things because I was overweight, I had to take a few items out of my bag before I left, I needed to make a trip to the drugstore just to get a few things like sunscreen, bug spray, shampoo. I Google mapped one of the closest stores, and the closest one was a Walgreens that was a 25-minute walk, a 30-minute walk one way. So I did that the first day, and that was all while I was accumulating myself to the humidity, the extreme heat, weather shift from Utah. To be honest, the area surrounding Barry University isn't the nicest, so I probably shouldn't have walked around by myself to go shopping for items. I mean, I was fine, nobody bothered me, I didn't feel unsafe necessarily, but it just probably wasn't the smartest thing to do. And I'm sorry, I was kind of just stingy with my money. I didn't want to feel like I had to get an Uber every day to do something, so I walked, but that was the last time I did it. So that was just a little bit frustrating. The location of Barry University, while the university itself is lovely, it has good resources for musicians. The practice rooms were nice. I mean, they always could have more practice rooms. That's like every singer's problem, is finding a practice room. Oh, also administrative wise, they would have on their website a practice room sign-up sheet that was supposed to go up every single night at 7 p.m. I can probably count on less than one hand the number of nights that it actually went up on 7 p.m. It usually went up super late at night or really early in the morning, and I'm sorry, I was not going to wait up till 12 or 2 a.m. to sign up for a practice room. So oftentimes I wouldn't get a spot, because by the time I looked the next morning at a decent hour, spots were already full. So that was extremely frustrating that they said, hey, it's going to be up this time every single night, everyone has free game to sign up, and that was not the case at all. But back to what I was saying, just Barry University, beautiful campus, beautiful performance spaces, but it's in the middle of freaking nowhere in Miami, not close to like the downtown of Miami, not within walking distance of any restaurants, any real resources, stores, which was just kind of a bummer. You just get a little bit stuck there because it's during the summer hours, it's very quiet, you're in a dorm, there's just not a whole lot to do in your downtime. So that was certainly a lot different from the previous year when I was in Italy. It was still like a really small town, but there was always something to do, always restaurants to go to within walking distance, just different things to experience and see. And I really missed that part of this program. So overall, I mean, you can probably tell that I just have a more negative view of this program than I did to Italy. I can't help but constantly compare the two. I just had a really positive experience at Italy. I mean, I filmed so many more vlogs there. I just didn't feel like there was as much I wanted to document in Miami, which is really such a shame. I do think the program has great potential. I love the shows that they're putting on. I think they have great ideas. I love that they involve so many singers that want to do roles that they aren't able to do elsewhere, that are trying to work their way into getting into more reputable programs, or programs that you wouldn't have to pay for. But again, I think they still have a lot of work to do in terms of cleaning out the kinks that I've talked about in this video. And I think overall they were a bit overpriced for what the program was. I think the dorms were certainly overpriced. The cafeteria was overpriced. It was a little pricey. But that's a lot of pay to sings right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon, unfortunately. Anyway, I needed to make this video to kind of close the chapter at the Miami Music Festival. I by no means regret going. I'm so glad that I was able to do a German opera. I don't have one on my resume. Well, now I do, but I didn't have one on before. To do a Strauss opera was an incredible opportunity. To work with the director and conductor that I had was such a special experience, and of course always meeting new singers and new people, networking that way has been so fun for me, and I'm hoping to still do more of that in the future. But if you guys have any other questions that I didn't really cover about the Miami Music Festival, feel free to leave a comment or direct message me, or find me on Facebook, whatever. I'm happy to answer any other questions that you have. If you liked this review video, please do give it a thumbs up, and make sure you subscribe for more videos like this. I have a lot of content to come, and I'm gonna try to do so much better with uploading more frequently, but I appreciate your patience, and as always, thank you so much for watching. Bye.